I'd like to welcome everybody to the study plan session for international CAs dealing with how to achieve your CPA designation. My name is Michael Levy. I'm a director of the PASS program, a program that has been preparing students for the CFE and other CPA related exams for many years. A portion of the presentation will be done by my partner who you'll be meeting soon, Ira Walfish. Let me begin by explaining what I'd like to cover. I'm going to start by providing a bird's eye view of the overall CPA program. What does the overall program look like that you need to go through in order to get your CPA? We'll then talk about the importance of achieving good case writing skills as well as technical skills in order to be successful on the exam. I'll spend just a minute or two telling you a little bit about us, about PASS. Then I'd like to spend a bit of time giving you a fairly detailed description of a program that PASS developed specifically with international students in mind to meet the needs of students who didn't go to school in Canada, who didn't come through the Canadian system. And then finally, Ira will review with you an example of a study plan for an international student. As you can imagine, you're dealing with a fairly major exam here, and having a structured study plan is extremely important for achieving success. Ira will go over with you an example of a good study plan. Please feel free along the way to ask questions at all times. I really welcome questions. I'm sure you're going to have many questions, and that's what I'm here for. So please don't be shy to ask questions at any time during my presentation. At the end of the day, guys, what I really want to achieve, my real purpose tonight, is to show you how to study and give you a good understanding of the CPA program so that you can make it through this exam on your first attempt. Let's start with a bird's eye view of the basic CPA program. This is what the program looks like for an average Canadian student, and then I'll tell you what modifications are present for international students. A typical Canadian student would have to go through typically 4 modules. A Core 1 module, which focuses primarily on financial accounting, a Core 2 module, which focuses on management accounting, and then they would have to do 2 elective modules from these 4 electives, any 2 of assurance, performance management, tax, or finance. Each of these modules is a number of weeks long, and then there's an exam that students have to write. Now, a student who wants to get his public accountant's license, say that student is working in public accounting and would like to develop a career in public accounting, they would have to choose the elective in assurance as well as tax. If you're not pursuing a career in public accounting, then it really doesn't matter which of the elective modules you do, you would just choose the ones that you feel strongest at. So a typical Canadian student first goes through Core 1, Core 2, then he or she does the electives. Then the student moves on to Capstone 1. Capstone 1 in a nutshell, and I'll give you more detail later on, but in a nutshell, Capstone 1 is a module where the student works as part of a group, and that group works on a major business case together, and I'll give you a fair amount of detail on that in just a couple of minutes. Then the student would do a second module called Capstone 2, where you're really writing practice cases in preparation for the CFE. And then finally, the student would move on to the CFE, which I'll describe in some detail in just a few minutes. So this is a bird's eye view of the overall program. Once the student passes the CFE, the student would then graduate as a CPA. Now, what does this mean to international students? Well, the good news is that most international students do not have to do the modules. There are, depending on where you come from, some international students may have to write challenge exams. By challenge exams, I mean that they'd have to write the final exam for either all or some of these modules, depending on where the student is coming from, depending on the country they're coming from. There is the odd situation where an international student may even have to do a module or 2. The good news is, if you're from India or Pakistan, then you don't have to do any of these 4 modules. You don't have to do Core 1 or Core 2 or the electives. So if you're from India or Pakistan, you're exempt from all of these modules. Now, what about Capstone 1 and Capstone 2? Well, as things stand right now, if you're from Pakistan, you're already absolved, you're already exempted from doing Capstone 1 and 2, and you would go directly to the CP. If you wish to take Capstone 1 or 2, you're welcome to, but you're not required to. For Indian CAs, there's an MOU which I've been led to understand will be signed very shortly. There's going to be a big Indian gala this Saturday night. So hopefully by a little after mid-November, there will be a new MOU signed in which Indian CAs will also not have to do Capstone 1 or 2. So right now they have to do it, but within the next few days, we expect a new MOU to be signed, at which time Indian CAs like Pakistani CAs will not have to do Capstone 1 and 2 and will be able to go directly to the CP unless they wish to do Capstone 1 or 2, but otherwise they can go directly to the CP. The 2019 CP is September 11th to 13th. Does anybody have any questions on the bird's eye view of the program? Please feel free if you have questions. Any questions on the bird's eye view? Okay, if nobody has questions, we'll then move on to a description of Capstone 1 and 2. At some point, even if you're exempted from Capstone 1 and 2, you'll still have to make the decision, do I want to go or not? So let me give you somewhat of a description of the capstones. If you're from a country where you have to attend Capstone 1 and 2, then of course you'll want to know what it's all about. So let me give you a fairly good description of what each of these capstones involve. It'll be very relevant to you if you need to go, and even if you're not required to go, it'll be relevant to you in making your decision as to whether you wish to go or not. The main focus of Capstone 1 is a big business case where you're dealing with high-level operating and strategic issues. In Capstone 1, you work as part of a group, so you're not working as an individual, you're working as part of a group. Capstone 1, in addition to being a standalone module that you work on for a number of weeks as part of a group, also prepares candidates for the first day of the CP. On day 1 of the CP, as I'll describe in a few minutes, you're going to be writing a large case, what we call a comp, a 4-hour large case. This case that you're going to be writing on day 1 of the CP is based on Capstone 1. During Capstone 1, you'll be dealing with a particular company in your case that's facing certain challenges. On day 1 of the CP, you'll be dealing with a case involving that same company, but it may be a number of years down the road, and that company is now facing new challenges. So day 1 of the CP builds on Capstone 1. Important to recognize that. Now, what are the key aspects of the Capstone 1 module? Number 1, there's a significant written report that you need to do, again, as part of a group. And again, it's a very high-level report. It's a type of report that in real life, one would submit to a board of directors or a team of senior executives. As a group, you would also make an oral presentation that's intended to simulate the type of presentation that one would make in real life to a board of directors or to a team of senior executives. And then the simulated board of directors or team of senior executives would then ask the group various questions. And obviously, as a group, you'd have to answer those questions that the board of directors or team of executives ask you. So this is basically what Capstone 1 entails. It typically starts with a 2-day weekend workshop, which provides an opportunity for the team members to meet each other. At that workshop, you'll be set up with various other people. You'll find out who your team is. You'll develop team agreements. You'll work on practicing your presentation skills. Given at the end of Capstone 1, you have to do this major presentation. You'll also come up with an action plan for completing the learning activities required during the module. Now, Capstone 1, I'm afraid to say, is very time consuming. From what I hear from students, it typically requires a good 10 to 15 hours of structured time per week for each candidate. So it's a lot of work, even though you're doing a group report and a group presentation, so you're not doing it all alone. Each individual needs to contribute about 10 to 15 hours a week. Now, The pass rate for Capstone 1 is not disclosed, but it's assumed to be very high. I would imagine, again, I'm guessing here, but I would imagine in the high 90s, just because I've really had a hard time finding people who failed Capstone 1. We teach a great number of students, and I can hardly think of any student I've ever met who didn't make it through Capstone 1. Capstone 1 is not intended to weed out students. Most of the weeding out takes place during the Core 1 and Core 2 modules and the elective modules. Once you get to Capstone 1, as long as you do the work they ask you to do, what you're going to be doing is making interim submissions, and they'll ask you to make various modifications. As long as you do what you're told to do, there's really no reason to fail Capstone 1. So the vast majority of people, and I mean really vast majority, will make it through. Now, in theory, it's possible for a whole group to fail if they don't do what they're told to do. It's also possible in theory for an individual student to fail if he or she doesn't pull his or her weight. In theory, you could have a situation where the group does a great job and passes, but where the whole group decides there was one student who didn't do anything, and the group suggests that that student not pass. Again, this is all theory because I've never heard of it happening. Pretty much virtually everybody I know who has taken Capstone 1 has made it through Capstone 1. Does anybody have any questions on Capstone 1 before I move on to Capstone 2? Any questions, guys? Please don't be shy about asking questions. At the end of the day, you'll learn more if you ask questions. No questions, guys? I just also want to remind people that if you do ask questions, please use the chat box and not the Q&A, because I monitor the chat box during the session, but I don't monitor the Q&A. Let's take a look now at Capstone 2. Capstone 2 has 3 primary objectives. Number 1, continue the development of the candidate's enabling competencies, particularly their communication and self-management competencies. So during Capstone 2, you're basically going to be picking up better enabling competencies. By that, I mean your soft skills, communication, your good case writing skills, etc. During Capstone 2, you're going to be writing practice cases. There are 3 days to the CP. You'll be writing practice cases that simulate the day 1 case, the day 1 comp, practice cases that simulate the day 2 cases, as well as practice cases that simulate the day 3 cases. And in a moment, I'll explain what each of the 3 days of the CP looks like. But in Capstone 2, you're doing a lot of practice case writing. And then finally, you're also continuing the development of integration of technical competency areas. You'll have a lot of chance during the writing of the cases to integrate your technical with case facts, etc., and learn how to apply your technical to cases. You'll probably also pick up some technical knowledge because as you write more and more cases, you tend to pick up a fair amount of technical knowledge. The good news about Capstone 2 is that everybody passes. So at the end of the day, as long as you submit the exam, you pass. Doesn't matter whether you do well or not. Capstone 2 is not intended to weed people out. Everybody passes as long as they submit their cases. Now, similar to the case of Capstone 1, Capstone 2 starts with a 2-day weekend workshop. Before that weekend workshop, you would write 1 multi-case. A multi-case is a case that's usually somewhere between 70 and 90 minutes. It's called a multi-case because it'll include multiple competencies. So it's not going to be all accounting or all assurance or all finance. It'll combine a number of different competencies. You would typically submit a multi prior to the workshop. During the workshop, you'll learn about how to debrief and analyze a response. And then over the course of approximately 7 weeks, you'll require about 10 to 15 structured hours a week, writing practice cases, debriefing them, etc. The number of hours required in a given week will depend on how much you write each week. Some weeks you'll be writing more cases than others. And some of the cases will be marked, others you'll have to mark yourself. And then there are also online seminars in which the cases are debriefed. Any questions before we move on further? Any questions on Capstone 2? Okay, if there are no questions on Capstone 2, we'll then move on. Okay, The CFE is 3 days long, as I mentioned a moment ago. I explained when we were going over Capstone 1 that day 1 of the CFE is a 4-hour comp. By comp, I mean large case. And it's based on the same company that you're working on during the Capstone 1 module. But for those of you who came in late, you'll be dealing with that same company, but it might be a few years down the road. And now that company is facing new challenges as opposed to the challenges they were facing during the Capstone 1 module. Harsh asks, is Capstone 2 also a group activity? No, Capstone 2 is not a group activity. In Capstone 2, you're simply writing practice cases and submitting them alone. Now, you could, of course, work with a group. Like if you have friends who are doing it at the same time, you might want to get together with your friends to go over the cases together after you've written them and after you've received them back. But it really is not a group activity. Each individual student submits his exam. Does that answer your question? Dilip asks, does Capstone 2 cover all 6 areas? The answer is yes. Capstone 2 will cover all 6 competencies. Now, what are the 6? My pleasure. What are the 6 competencies, guys? Basically, there are 6 areas or 6 competencies that can be tested. But again, before I move on to the 6 competencies, I got a little bit sidetracked when I just answered that question, and I almost forgot to go over this thing right here. So let's come back to this before we look at the 6 competencies. Day 2 is going to be what we call the roll comp. It's also referred to as the elective comp. So roll comp and elective comp mean the same thing. On day 2, you've got one big 5-hour case, which I'll describe in more detail in just a moment. And the exact requirements you're going to have to deal with on day 2 will depend on the role that you choose. Again, I will explain that in more detail in just a few minutes. So day 2 is 5 hours, one big case. Day 3, you're going to be writing shorter cases that are referred to as multis. I mentioned this earlier. A multi is typically 70 to 90 minutes long and will cover more than one of these 6 competencies. Multi, by definition, means multiple competencies. A typical multi will test 4 to 5 of these competencies that you see down here. At the end of the day, the multis will add up to 240 minutes. So for example, you may have one 90-minute question, one 80-minute question, one 70-minute question. That would add up to 240. They can do it however they wish to. They could, in theory, give you 3 80-minute questions. But at the end of the day, it'll add up to 240 minutes. So at the end of the day, day 1 is 4 hours, one big 4-hour case. Day 2, one big 5-hour case. Day 3, 240 minutes or 4 hours, made up typically of 3 cases. Now, the 6 technical areas, by competencies I mean technical areas, that will be tested over the course of the CFE are audit and assurance, financial reporting, management accounting, finance, tax, and then strategy and governance. Now, in order to pass the CFE, you need to achieve depth in 2 areas. And so you need to achieve depth in 2 of these competencies. And for the other 4 competencies, you simply need to achieve breadth. So by depth, I mean you need to show a really strong in-depth knowledge of 2 of the competencies. And for the other 4 competencies, a basic knowledge will be sufficient. Now, let's say I want to get my public accountant's license because I want to pursue a career in external audit. In that situation, I would need to achieve depth specifically in assurance and financial reporting. So I don't have a choice of which of the 2 competencies I'm going to achieve depth in. It's got to be audit and assurance and financial reporting because this is the underpinning of a career in public accounting. Otherwise, you simply need to achieve depth. You need to show really strong knowledge in either financial reporting or management accounting, one or the other. And then you need to achieve depth in any one of the following 4 competencies: assurance, tax, performance management, or finance. So you have a lot more choice if you're not going to be pursuing a career in public accounting. Now, the question I often get from students is, do I have to make a choice of my depth areas prior to my CP? So the answer goes as follows. When it comes to financial reporting and management accounting, you do not have to make a choice prior to your exam, because everybody is going to have to answer the same requirements over the course of the CP in the area of financial reporting and management accounting. Everybody's going to have to address the same requirements. When you address those requirements, it'll be important that you show depth in at least one or the other, either financial reporting or management accounting. Throughout the exam, you'll be doing your utmost to show depth in both, because you don't want to take a chance. You want to try to do as well as you can in both and hope that you'll get depth in at least one. And the truth is that many of my students end up achieving depth in both, which is fine, which is great. So for financial reporting and management accounting, everybody addresses the same requirements, and you try to get depth in both if you can, but as long as you get depth in one, that's good enough for getting your CPA. Now, when it comes to assurance, tax, performance management, and finance, for these 4 competencies, you would choose one of them in advance, even before the CP. So before I even write my CP, I would let CPA Canada know I want to choose assurance as my depth area, or I want to choose tax or performance management or finance as my depth area. The reason why you need to choose one of these 4 competencies prior to the CP has to do with how the roll on the elective comp works. I mentioned that you have a 5-hour roll/elective comp on day 2. The way that the day 2 comp works is you're given a big case to write, and the way it works is as follows. The comp will only test a maximum of 3 competencies. The comp will test, the day 2 comp will test financial reporting and or management accounting. So they can test just financial reporting or just management accounting or both. And then on top of that, the comp will test whatever depth area you chose, assurance, tax, performance management, or finance. So let's say I choose assurance as my depth area. I will have to deal with financial reporting and or management accounting, and then all the rest of the requirements that I need to answer will relate to assurance. If the guy sitting next to me chose performance management as his depth area, then that fellow will do financial reporting and or management accounting just like me. But the third area they're going to deal with will be performance management. So all you're doing on the comp is financial reporting and or management accounting plus whatever depth area you chose. Now, obviously, the information I'm going to be working with in my comp is going to differ depending on my depth area. The way that the comp works is that there's certain common information that includes the financial reporting and management accounting information you need, which everybody reads. And then there's a specific appendix that you read that relates to your own depth area. So the person who chose assurance will read the common information that everybody reads, plus a special appendix on assurance. The person who chose finance as their depth area will read the common information, plus a special appendix on finance. This is why you need to choose your depth area in assurance, tax, performance management, or finance prior to the exam. Does anybody have any questions on how the CP works? Please don't be shy. Any questions, guys? Nobody has any questions? Okay, nobody has any questions, then we can move on. What I want to talk about now is the importance of case writing. When it comes to the CP, it's important to understand that unlike some other countries, the CP is a case-based exam. The whole exam is cases from beginning to end. Some days are comps where it's one big case, and then day 3 is shorter cases. But the whole exam is cases. No multiple choice, no short answer questions. So one critical success factor for making it through the CP is the ability to write cases effectively. Now, This year, for the first time, we've restructured our course for international students to allow what we call an early case writing option. What we're finding through our experience teaching many international students is that very often international students need more practice in case writing than the average Canadian student. And the reason is very simple. An average Canadian student is writing cases typically throughout university. They're also going through the modules, Core 1, Core 2, the electives, where they're writing cases. So by the time they get to the CP, they've got a lot of experience with case writing. Many international students have virtually no experience with case writing. So they need a lot more time to learn how to write cases. So what we've done now is we've developed a version of our international course where students can begin writing cases very early, already in January. Ira will give you a lot more detail on the timing when he does his study plan. But I strongly, strongly recommend that you start as early as possible with your case writing because it may take you many months to master. Some people can master it quickly, but others may take 6 months or more to master it. If you start your case writing early, and our early version of our international course has you writing cases already in January, then even if it takes you 6 or 7 months to master case writing, you'll be ready before the CP. For those who cannot start early for whatever reason, maybe they're busy in January, February, March, we do also have a late version. Now, what about technical? Getting through the CP, very, very important to learn how to write cases effectively. But the foundation is still technical. However good a case writer you are, you still need to know your technical, of course. So major areas to focus on for technical, the two biggest areas I would spend my time on are financial accounting and management accounting. These are the two most heavily tested areas on the CP. So very, very important to have a really strong knowledge of both financial accounting and management accounting. Within financial accounting, you need to know ASPE, which is basically Canadian developed accounting principles that are intended for private enterprise. And then, of course, IFRS, which some of you are familiar with, depending on where you're coming from. You may have already been using IFRS in your company of origin. And then management accounting is as heavily attested as management accounting. I know for many of you, you probably came from countries where the main focus was financial accounting. On the CPA exam, financial accounting and management accounting are equally important. Any questions, guys? Now, just a moment with regard to avoiding what I call technical traps. And remember, we mentioned earlier that on the comp, you have to choose a depth area. One of those depth areas is tax. My experience has been that very few international students will choose tax as their depth area, which makes a lot of sense because typically they came from a different tax regime. So their tax knowledge is very different from Canadian tax. So as long as you don't choose tax as your depth area, you only need to know tax at a fairly basic level. For those who don't choose it as a tax as a depth area, they need to know basic compliance. So what sort of benefits are taxable? What am I allowed to deduct? How do I do a basic corporate tax calculation? Basic compliance. None of the intricate tax planning is typically important unless you choose tax as your depth area. So at the end of the day, don't fall into the trap of spending hours and hours and hours on tax, because at the end of the day, you don't need to know all the intricacies of tax. And if you try to achieve that, you could end up spending far too much time. Also, when it comes to audit, finance, and governance, you can pick up a lot of this through your case writing, because the amount of finance you need to know, fairly narrow. Governance, or what they call strategy and governance on this exam, is primarily common sense. Even audit, to a large degree, is common sense, right? When I'm dealing with strengths and weaknesses of an internal control system, when I'm dealing with procedures, these are all examples of what I would call, for the most part. How do I get good at audit? Through case writing. Obviously, there is some technical you need to learn. You certainly need to spend some time learning about the different reports, etc. But a large part of audit is common sense, and you get good at it through practice case writing. Are there any questions before I describe who passes? Any questions before I describe who passes? Okay, so let's talk for a moment now about who has passed. At PASS, we've been offering courses since 1989. We first started with the UFI back in 1989. The CPA only started in 2015. The UFI was the predecessor exam, and we've been teaching courses for the CPA ever since there's been a CPA, which is 2015. So first we taught for the predecessor exam, and then for the CPA. Over the course of the years, we've offered courses in all of the big firms, as well as the big four firms, as well as numerous mid-sized firms. Our courses are offered across Canada. I was lucky enough when I wrote the UFI many years ago to win the gold medal. Our instructors typically have a lot of experience, and most of the instruction is done by Ira and myself. Our markers have a huge amount of experience, so they can give you reliable and good constructive feedback. And overall, we've had very, very good feedback from our students over the course of the years. I see that Dilip has a question. Do you need to know auditing standards? No, you certainly do need to know auditing standards. There's no question about it. But as I was saying before, a large part of audit isn't simply memorizing standards and reciting them. A large part of audit is applying those standards and learning how to apply those standards, whether it's materiality, risk, procedures. A lot of that comes from practice case writing. Have I answered your question, Dilip? Great. You're welcome. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to describe to you the PASS International CPA program. What we did was we put together a program that we think meets all the needs of your typical international student, your typical student who didn't come through the Canadian educational system. What we made sure to include when we designed this course are the following components. We realized that you need a strong technical foundation to get through the CPA. So as I'll describe in a moment, we provide you with a technical study binder. We provide you with videos on all of the competencies. We provide you with live courses on the two major technical areas, financial accounting and management accounting. We provide you with extensive case writing instruction and the opportunity to write many practice cases, which are professionally marked by our very experienced markers and debriefed in class, typically by myself and my partner, Ira, who you'll be meeting soon. And then finally, as I'll describe a little more in a few minutes, we also have personal counseling sessions where the marker meets with you and goes over your exam with you. Before I go further, I see there's a question here. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to just explain a little bit more about each of the components of the PASS program. Let's start with the technical binder and videos. One of the things that we've seen with international students is that many of them wrote their international CA exam many, many years ago. So even topics that they once knew, they've had a lot of years to forget. So even things like finance, management, accounting that are pretty universal, that are not unique to Canada, pretty much the same whether you're in India, Pakistan, Australia, etc. But nevertheless, people forget. The other issue from a technical perspective that international students face is that they're typically not familiar with Canadian tax. They may also not be familiar, and most of the time are not familiar, with ASPE, which is Canadian Developed Accounting Standards for Private Enterprise. So even if they're familiar with IFRS, they're not familiar with ASPE. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, on the CPA, they will typically test both IFRS and ASPE. So one of the things we do is as soon as you register with PASS, literally within a day or two, You'll receive an extensive study binder with all of the competencies, with technical notes on all the competencies, and you'll have access to videos that cover the various competencies. Now, because financial accounting and management accounting are the most heavily tested areas on the CFE, for financial accounting and management accounting, we actually have live sessions in which we review all of the major topics. So we'll go over all the major financial accounting topics, both from an IFRS as well as an ASPE perspective. So you'll learn both. For some of you, the IFRS may be review. For some of you, it will be new. And I think for most of you, the ASPE will be new. And we realize that. So we'll teach it in a way that you can learn it even if it's your first time learning it. We also realize that even if you can learn your technical, half the battle is applying your technical effectively. So what we'll also do during the course is we'll also use cases to demonstrate how to apply your technical. So that'll reinforce the technical and it'll teach you how to apply it, because at the end of the day on the CP, you're not just reciting technical, you're applying technical knowledge. Now, as I mentioned before, we also have a live management accounting review because it's such an important topic. And similar to the case of financial accounting, in addition to going over all of the technical areas that are difficult, we'll also use mini cases to demonstrate application of your technical. So at the end of the day, you'll have self-study for the other 4 competencies, for finance, tax, governance, and governance and assurance. What you'll have is you'll have a binder with detailed notes and videos, and then for management accounting and financial accounting, live courses. So that is what we cover on the technical side. Now let's talk about the case writing, because we mentioned earlier that success on the CP is a function of mastering the technical, but equally important, mastering the case writing. So for the case writing, we have a full day or 2 evenings dedicating to teaching you some basic techniques for how to effectively write a CFE case and get the necessary depth to pass. Over the course of the program, you're going to write 9 multis. These are the 70 to 90 minute cases that test the number of competencies. You'll also write 2 comps, 2 roll comps. And then for 8 of the multis and 2 of the comps, you'll have debriefings, typically with Ira or myself, where we'll go over how you should have attacked the case and how you should have written it up, how to write it up effectively. You'll also have 3 personal counseling sessions where the marker meets with you and goes over your exam with you. This is something that we only offer to international students. When a Canadian student takes our course, they do not get 3 personal counseling sessions. But again, we find that because case writing is typically much newer to international students, unlike Canadian students who've been writing cases for years, we find that the international students need a little bit more hand-holding when it comes to case writing. So that's why we have our professional marker meet with you on more than one occasion to go over your case with you. And we think that students get a great deal out of these personal counseling sessions. You'll get a very comprehensive binder with very comprehensive notes and a detailed marking publication. Now, in addition to having the opportunity to write practice cases that are marked and returned to you with a lot of detail, in addition to that, we also have what we call technique sessions. Technique sessions are sessions where you don't actually write a case, but we teach you what we think are very important techniques for achieving success on the exam. One session which I do is called numerical methods, where I teach you how to get through the quants within the time requirements. One of the biggest challenges on the CFE is time constraints, particularly on day 3. And the only way you can get through this exam in good time is if you can learn to get through the numbers efficiently. If you get bogged down on the numbers, very hard to get through the exam in time. So we have a full day dedicated to teaching you how to get through the numbers. And again, the numbers are a very important part of the exam, particularly for day 3. Then we've got a day on depth and financial accounting and a day on integrated and also a portion of a day on integrated audit. Now, in these sessions, our goal is not to teach you the technical. That's already been covered in the technical part of the course. Here, our focus is teaching you how to get enough depth so that you can achieve what's called competent. I'm not going to get into detail at this stage on how the exam is marked. We'll get into a lot more detail once you're in the course. But for now, suffice it to say that when they typically mark you, say you're writing up an accounting issue, say you're dealing with development costs and you're writing up the issue, they can rank you anywhere from nominal, which means you did a really poor job, to reaching, which means you did a so-so job, but you didn't reach the level they were looking for, to competent, which means you hit the level they were looking for. What we're trying to do in depth in financial accounting is teach you how to apply your technical in an effective way so that you're able to achieve competent, which is exactly the level you're aiming for on the exam. And we'll do exactly the same thing in assurance. In our integrated audit session, we're teaching you how to apply your audit skills in such a way that you achieve competent. And then finally, we have an integrated tax day where it's basically a half-a-day course where we focus on the application of tax to the CP. The first three of these sessions are not very technical. The only one that's somewhat technical is the integrated tax. But even there, a large part of the focus is on application. Throughout all of these technique days, you won't be writing cases, but we'll be using either full cases or portions of cases to demonstrate how to apply your technical knowledge. As I mentioned before, the personal counseling sessions I think are invaluable. There's nothing like having a marker sit down and actually explain to you in plain, simple English what you need to do to improve. And as I mentioned before, you'll have a chance to meet with a marker to go over 3 of your cases. And again, it's a wonderful opportunity for somebody to be able to tell you specifically what you need to do to improve. We said earlier in the session that this year, for the first time, PASS has modified the international course to allow people to get a very early start on their case writing. And I explained earlier why it's so important to start writing early. So we now have 2 versions of the course. Version 1 is a version where you can already begin case writing in January. And that way you'll be writing cases throughout the winter, throughout the spring, right into the summer. It's a fantastic thing because Ira and I both believe that an early start on case writing greatly improves your chances of success because many people take many months to learn how to write cases effectively. And if you start in January, even if you're one of these people that takes 6 months, 7 months, you'll still be fine by the time you get to the CP. Another huge advantage of starting early is in the summer, you're going to be very busy with Capstone 2, and you'll have less time to write cases with PASS. So if you can get a whole bunch of cases under your belt in the winter, that will be lovely. So we strongly recommend when you look at version 1 of our course, when you go to our website, you'll see that we've got 2 schedules, one for version 1 and one for version 2. We strongly recommend version 1 so you can get an early start on case writing. Now, we still have a version 2 where the case writing begins later, doesn't begin until the spring, and the cases are spread over the spring and summer and no case writing in the winter. Why do we have a version 2? We only have a version 2 because there is the odd person who, for whatever reason, cannot start case writing early. Maybe they're too busy in the winter, or who just joins the course too late to do version 1. You know, you guys are lucky because you're already thinking about the CP now, so you're not too late for version 1. But we do get people who will call us February, March. At that point, it's too late for version 1, and we have to put them into version 2. But if at all possible, our strong recommendation would be the early case writing version 1. Something that we've introduced for the first time this year is our alternative course for students not attending Capstone 1 and 2. I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation that if you're from Pakistan, you're already exempted from Capstone 1 and 2. If you're from India, it's almost certain that you'll be exempted. There is an MOU that we expect to be signed within the next few days. So hopefully before November is over, you should be exempted. And therefore, in all likelihood, very, very, very likely, if you're from India, you will also not have to do capstone 1 and 2. So if you don't have to do capstone 1 and 2, you would then be eligible, instead of doing capstone 1 and 2, to do the PASS alternative course. What we've done at PASS is we've come up with an alternative course for students who choose not to do capstone 1 and 2. What we try to achieve is the following. Capstone 2, as I mentioned earlier when I described it to you, is effectively practice case writing. What we do in our alternative course is we have you write the same practice cases. The practice cases you write in capstone 2 are all based on old CPs. We have you write those same old CPs, but instead of writing them with CPA Canada as part of capstone 2, you would write those cases with PASS. And similar to the case of capstone 2, the cases would be professionally marked, and we would return them to you with copious comments, with really good constructive comments. Our goal, quite honestly, is to give you superior comments to what you would get in capstone 2. That's really what we're trying to achieve. We really push our markers hard to give you good comments. So in the alternative course, you'll write the same cases that you would if you went to capstone 2, and you'll get them professionally marked. Now, what about capstone 1? So quite honestly, in our alternative course, we are making no attempt to replicate most of capstone 1, because most of capstone 1 focuses on skills that are completely irrelevant for the CP. The main goal of capstone 1 is putting together a big report for a board of directors, making a formal presentation, doing a long formal report, working as part of a team. These are all wonderful skills for the real world, but pretty much irrelevant for the CP. The only aspect of capstone 1 module that is relevant for the CP is you need to have a good enough knowledge of the capstone 1 case that is done during the module, because day 1 of the CP builds off the case you do in the capstone 1 module. So what we would provide to you in the alternative course is a review of the critical aspects of the capstone 1 case that was used during the module, so that you have all the necessary knowledge you need to attack day 1 of the CP. But the rest of capstone 1, the team building and the presentation skills, etc., we don't address at all, because they're not relevant for the CP. Even for the real world, by the way, I'm assuming that many of you probably already have those skills, since you tend to be a great deal more mature than your average 22-year-old Canadian student. Now, the additional cost, if you take an alternative course, in addition to the cost of the normal international course, the international course is normally $19.95 plus HST. Which is required if you're living in Canada. The the alternative course costs an additional $1,050. Now let me explain this very clearly. You would not be paying the full $1,050 to pass. The cost of the alternative course, so in addition to the $19.95, the cost of the alternative course is $800. However, in order to take the alternative course, you need to have the old CPs that you're going to be writing as practice exams. The old CPs, along with detailed marking keys, can be purchased from CPA Canada. The price last year was $250. We expect it to be the same this year. So what you would do is you would be paying PASS $800, and you would be paying CPA Canada or your provincial CPA $250 for a total of $1,050. If you choose to go to capstone 1 and 2, based on the fee schedule on the CPA website, it's $1,125 US for capstone 1, and the same price for capstone 2, which is a total of $2,250. If you translate that into Canadian dollars, depending on the rate you use, it's just under $3,000. So as you can see, the cost for the alternative course is a great deal less expensive. So when you're asking yourself, do I want to do capstone 1 and 2? Obviously, one advantage of not going through capstone 1 and 2 is obviously a greatly reduced cost. But there's also another advantage, even if money is a non-issue to you. There's also another big advantage. The other advantage is when I went over what Capstone 1 entails, it becomes very evident that most of the time you're spending on Capstone 1, working on your team building, your presentation, etc., is time that's spent on something that has absolutely nothing to do with the CFE. So it's almost a diversion from your studying for the CFE. If you choose not to take Capstone 1, you have a lot more free time to work on your technical skills, to work on your case writing skills, to work on the skills that you really need to pass the CFE. Do I believe that the alternative course will prepare you adequately for the CFE? I certainly do. Because again, what we've tried to do in the alternative course is give you the skills you're going to need for the CFE and not waste time on the skills that you don't need for the CFE. Does anybody have any questions on the alternative course? Any questions on the alternative course? Any questions on anything I've done so far? Okay, a final point I'd like to make. Oh, we do have a question here. Let's take a look here. Somebody asks, Millie asks, how is that different from the cases we will write and pass will mark in the normal version? When you say the normal version, what do you mean exactly, Millie? Do you mean in the regular course for international students? Are you asking for the difference between the regular course for international students and the alternative course that people might do instead of Capstone 1 and 2? Is that what you're asking me? Okay, so let me explain. During the regular international course, you'll be writing simulated cases, not actual CFEs, but simulated cases. During the alternative course, you'll be writing old CFEs. We believe it's important for you to do both because just writing the past cases is not enough. The simulated past cases is not enough. Just writing old CFEs is not enough. Very important you need both because you need ample case writing practice when you're an international student. Now, you're also asking me, can we choose to do either of Capstone and not do other one from CPA Canada? I believe so. You can choose to do one or the other rather than both if that's what you wish. Dilip is asking, when will the alternative course start? The alternative course will probably, again, we don't have exact dates, but it'll start toward the end of July, beginning of August, and it'll go until fairly shortly before the CFE, similar to the Capstone 2 offered by CPA Canada, which typically starts around mid-July and goes until a few days before the CFE. So again, we may not follow the exact dates, but it'll be approximately the same timing. Let me see if there's any other questions. Millie says, which will be suggested? I'm not sure you're welcome, Dilip. Millie, I'm not sure I understand your question. Which will be suggestive, Capstone 1 or Capstone 2? I'm not sure what that means. Can you maybe clarify that for me, please? I'm not clear what you mean, which will be suggestive. Oh, okay, so did I answer your earlier question? Or is this question still outstanding? Will there be a binder? Oh, okay. Will there be a binder for the alternative course? Dilip, for the alternative course, what you'll be doing is writing practice CFE cases. So you'll be getting all of your material directly from CPA Canada. So that's what you'll be spending the $250, approximately $250 on. What they'll provide to you is extensive material. They'll provide to you the cases themselves. They'll provide to you the detailed evaluation guides and solutions and debriefing notes. So you won't get a physical binder, but you'll get very, very extensive notes from CPA Canada for the alternative course. Millie, have I answered all your questions or is that, oh, here. Okay, here, let me take a look, Millie. Prior to case writing early version starting in January, are we expected to complete technical subjects? That's an excellent question. What I would suggest is you try to get through as much of the technical as you can prior to the case writing. I would not try to listen to the management accounting or financial accounting videos I would just look at the notes for those subjects because you're going to have live courses in the winter in those subjects. For the other 4 competencies, I would try to get through them as best you can. Now, in other words, I would expect you for the other 4 competencies to go over the notes and listen to those videos on whatever subjects you're not comfortable with, where you think you need some help. Now, does that mean that I expect you to have perfect technical by the time you get to the cases? Of course not. Try to get as much technical as you can done. The more you get done, the better. But don't worry about getting it all done before the case writing, because you're going to pick up a huge amount of technical knowledge through the cases. What I used to do when I would write my cases as practice is, if technical issues came up in my cases that I wasn't familiar with, I would, as part of my personal debriefing of the case, go over those technical areas I didn't know well enough to address in the case, or to address adequately in the case. So try to get as much technical as you can done before the course, but don't worry about getting it perfect. Nobody does. You'll have lots of chance to upgrade your technical as you write your cases. Just in terms of a final point with regard to the course, we realize that people are, my pleasure, we realize that people are very, very busy. So we try to provide maximum flexibility. We have, for people who like in-class study, many of the classes are offered in an in-class environment. All of the classes are offered live online. And then on top of that, we also have videos. Every class is videoed. So if you miss a class, which invariably you may, either due to personal commitments or work commitments, you can always watch it on video. So again, we've taken into account how busy everybody is. We realize that international students tend to be even busier than the average Canadian student, given the stage of life you're in. You typically have a more responsible job than your 22-year-old Canadian student. Many of you have families. So people often find this video fallback to be very, very useful in case you miss a class. The other thing we're very, very flexible about is the ability to switch between in-class and live online sessions. When you register, you'll be asked whether you want to do the in-class versus live online version. Let's say you join the in-class version, but there's some in-class sessions that just don't work out with your schedule. So for those sessions, you can come to the live online classes. Vice versa, if you register for the live online sessions, but there's some live online sessions that don't meet your schedule, come to the in-class for those. So we're very flexible about students moving between in-class and live online. Okay, let's take a look here. What all locations schedule available for in-class? If you take a look, Millie, at the PASS website, and our PASS website you'll see on this presentation in just a moment, it is Pass Your CPA, PASSYOUR, CPA.ca. If you go to our website, you will see the schedule for the in-class as well as the online. The in-class sessions are in Toronto, typically at University of Toronto. Okay. Dilip, you asked me, what will PASS be providing for the alternative course? For the alternative course, number one, you'll have the opportunity to write all of the same practice CPs as you would write in if you went to Capstone 2. Plus, we'll give you the necessary foundation in the Capstone 1 case that people would be doing as part of the Capstone 1 module. We'll give you the necessary knowledge you need to write of that case so that you can effectively write day 1 of the CP, which is based on Capstone 1, on the Capstone 1 case used in the module. What I've done in the next 3 slides is just give you examples of testimonials from former students. I'll let you read these on your own. There's lots more of these if you go to our website. I just arbitrarily chose a few, just chose 3 over here. But I think you'll see when you look at these testimonials that we've got a lot of happy students who really found the course to be, instrumental in helping them get through their exam. So I'll let you look at these on your own. Again, you all have the PowerPoint, plus feel free to go to our website for further examples of testimonials. This completes the portion of the presentation that I'm going to be doing. The remainder of the presentation will be done by my partner, Ira Walfish. He'll start by explaining to you why you can't just rely on the prep that CPA Canada provides, and then he'll go over a detailed study plan with you. So I thank you all for your attention. I'm just going to turn you over to Ira.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. The mic was muted. Now you can hear me. Um, my name is Ira Walfish. I'm Michael's partner. Um, just to make sure you guys can hear me now, right? Give me a quick yes. Beautiful. Okay. So I'm going to continue. I'm Ira, Michael's partner. I'm going to continue the presentation. Obviously, if you have any questions along the way, um, please stop me and just ask, and I'll respond. Okay, so Michael left off here. What I want to do is just kind of finish off the lecture and then go and talk a little bit about a study plan. So why not rely on CPA Canada for your CPA prep? So I guess there's a number of reasons. Number one, more feedback is needed. They only give you so much in Capstone 2. You need more cases. It's just simply not enough. It's just simply not enough cases. One of the things we really try very hard to do is our case take-ups. We put a lot of effort into the case take-ups. So that's something you're not going to get very much in Capstone 2. I think it's a very important piece when you guys are writing cases, how to learn how to write the cases. We also have a lot of feedback. We also teach certain techniques. That is totally different. You will not get that in a Capstone 2 or anything. These techniques are very important. We try and show you how to move up the levels to get from reaching competent to competent. That is very, very important. And of course, we have technical, which is, again, not something that would be provided in Capstone 2. So it's basically, we're offering a lot of different things that you will not get from CPA Canada. The summer is busy. With or without Capstone 2, the summer is busy. We try and be very flexible. So the real answer is yes, you can work, take Capstone 2, and also take our course. We record everything, as I'm sure Michael said. We give you options. You can come to class. You can do live online. You could do both. You could do neither. Then you can watch the video. So we try and make it very, very flexible. And if you're doing the early version of the course, the truth is we don't even have that many classes in the summer. If you're doing version 1 that Michael talked about, where you write the cases January, February, and March. Okay, is that clear? Any questions? Is everyone good? Okay, people, let me show you what I want to show you now. I want to show you a sample study plan. Obviously, you would have to do your own study plan, and this is really just a sample, but it's going to give you a good idea of how much is kind of involved and the timing of things. So what it is, we have a study plan in Excel, which I think we sent. I went and I put it into the lecture, so you guys can see it here. It's just kind of convenient as opposed to showing you the Excel, which I don't think works so well on WebEx. Okay, I started the study plan in January. Now, the truth of the matter is, if anybody registers before January, I will definitely keep you busy, because the first thing we do is we will give you a technical binder and access to the videos. That will be self-study. You'll start to study the technical on your own, and you'll start to watch some of the videos. That will continue. You can see here in, January 7, January 14, these are basically, you're still doing technical. If you choose version 1 of the course, we will start you in Casewriting the week of January 21st. You'll watch a session, a live online session. You can see all this on the schedule, by the way. Okay, so you'll have one case basically in that week. You're continuing on with your technical. Then we will have both. The case writing will continue. So you notice we have past case writing session in week 3 over here in February 18. And we have another one here in March 25th. So you'll be doing cases every month, January, February, March. We also have technical course. We have 2 technical courses Michael mentioned. We have financial accounting and we have management accounting. So depending on the week, I don't know, one week might be both, one week might be, I don't know, most of these weeks here looks like they're both of them. This week here is only financial accounting. So basically, there's about 8 financial accounting sessions. and there's about 6 management accounting sessions. And you'll be doing those throughout the month of February and March, in addition to a little bit of the case writing if you chose version 1. Everyone good? When you get into April, the case writing will pick up a little more. This is regardless of version 1 or version 2. You'll have case writing, you can see here. You'll have case writing over here. We also threw in the odd case that you will do on your own. For example, people look at this one. This case, for example, is a CFE case. It's not our case. We are not marking that. I'm suggesting you do that just for extra practice. It does not conflict with Capstone 2. So it's not going to be marked in the summer. They don't mark every CFE case. So that's an example of one, that exact question on 2015, September, on that CFE, paper 3, third day, question 1. That case is not going to be marked in Capstone 2. At some point, you're going to write it for practice. And I'm suggesting, okay, write it here just for a little extra case, case practice. Okay, is everyone good? Now, I built in Capstone 1 into the study plan. People, as Michael probably mentioned, if you're listening to this video and you are a CA from India or Pakistan, you will not have to go to Capstone 1, okay, assuming now this video is being taped before it's official for India, but it'll hopefully be official in a few days from now, when you will not have to go to Capstone 1 and Capstone 2. I built it in. When you're in Capstone 1, if you take it, you're not doing anything else. So just look at May 13 onwards. All I've got is Capstone 1. That is part of the problem. All I got is Capstone 1 here, all the way up into the first week of July, because you're doing 10 to 15 hours work a week in Capstone 1, and you're also working. You don't have time to do anything else. As Michael mentioned, we are recommending you don't take Capstone 1 if you have the choice. It's not worth it. We should be able to give you enough guidance so you'll be fine on the first day of the CFE. That will open up a lot of time. It will open up, count the weeks here. It'll open up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then on the previous slide, 7, 8, that opens up about 8 weeks that you guys will have time to practice additional cases, okay? And we can even give you cases if you want. Okay, I have a question. Capstone 1 case would be the same as a CFE? No. Okay, again, I don't know how much, I'm not exactly sure what Michael explained for Capstone 1. In Capstone 1, they give you a 30, 40 page case. You spend the 8 weeks in your group going over that case. Come the first day of the CFE, they will take the same company and they will say, it's now 10 years later. And they will give you another 15-page case with entirely different set of circumstances because it will be 10 years later. But the base of the case, it'll be the same company. You'll recognize the names, you'll recognize the president, you'll recognize the characters in the case. So you'll have to, on day 1, remember a few things from the Capstone 1 case, but you'll be faced with an entirely new set of circumstances you'll have to respond to. Okay? So that is, we believe we can give you enough information of the case. You'll have to read the case. If you don't go to Capstone 1, you'll have to read the Capstone 1 case, absolutely. Okay? You have to read the thing. You have to be familiar with the basics. But that's it. You're spending 8 weeks going into extreme detail, okay, responding to a 40-page case where 95% of the detail is not necessary for the first day of the CFE. You don't need to remember all that. I've seen these reports that people put in for Capstone 1. They do a 10-page cash flow. What are you going to do with a 10-page cash flow on the first day of the CFE? If you have to do a cash flow the first day of the CFE, it's going to be entirely different numbers. You're not expected to remember the numbers from the Capstone case in May. Okay, if you get faced with a cash flow the first day, they're going to give you more numbers. You'll have to do a cash flow. So it's you're not, you know what I mean? So a lot of what you're doing in Capstone 1, as I think Michael said, has nothing to do with day 1 of the CFE. It's to teach you how to work in groups and to do an oral presentation. Okay, so continuing on to the study plan. Come July, if you go to Capstone 1, it's finished. If you don't go, okay, fine. Now our course starts. We have not our course, but we have more sessions. Starting July 8, we have more sessions. You're doing a few more cases. You're continuing to review your technical. And our course continues here. Our course continues the end of July. Capstone 2 begins. Now, people, Michael probably already mentioned, you don't need to take Capstone 2 assuming you don't have to take it. We're recommending you buy the material. We will mark your cases. Around the end of July, we will set you up with a marker, and you'll simply write the cases for our markers instead of writing the cases for Capstone 2. Okay, so here, wherever you see Capstone 2, it doesn't matter. In the study plan, that's the same thing. Instead of writing the cases for Capstone 2, you can write the cases for us. Okay, and we'll be doing the marking. We have professional markers. What's the difference? And then our course finishes. It doesn't say here, it's around the first week of August when our course finishes. And you're continuing to basically write those cases, getting them marked, and you're continuing to review your technical. And that goes right into September. And then the CFE is September 11 to 13, and you're done. That is the basic study plan. So if you want to put it all together, people, I don't care so much about this slide, but some people always say to me, how many hours is it? Okay, I built in about 350 hours. That's what this is. This is about 350 hours. Okay, this is about as specific as I can get from January. Obviously, this depends on how many cases you're writing and how much time you're spending per week, etc. But if you really want to know, okay, this is what I built in. This includes all of the case writing, all of the take-ups, all of the classes. I built in everything here, about 350 hours from January until September 11. Questions? Any questions on the study plan? Does that make sense? Okay, so people, look, after all is said and done, some key points that I would want you to walk away with. We do think writing cases early is very important. You're learning a new skill. It is a challenge for international students. I'm not saying you have to start writing the cases in January. If you're very busy and you can't do it and you start in April, fine. But we think it's better to start early, and you've got to write all the cases. When I say Capstone 2 here, I don't care Capstone 2. If you're not doing it for Capstone 2, it's the same thing. You're doing it for us at the end of July. It's just not a good exam to take shortcuts. You're learning a new skill. It takes time. The more cases you do, the better your technical becomes, the more you learn how to write the cases. Time budgeting, the third point, is very important. That's a matter of discipline. A case is 80 minutes, spend 80 minutes, not 85, not 75, spend 80 minutes. That's the way the cases are designed. You learn a lot from debriefing. Debriefing means when you get back your case, if it's being marked, or if it's not being marked, when you read the solution, you look at what you did and you start to compare. You try and figure out why you missed things. We actually have a whole handout in one of our sessions. I don't even remember where, but in one of our sessions, we have a handout. We'll spend 20 minutes going over how to debrief a case. It's very important. You don't just write these cases, get them back, look at their results, and then say, okay, fine, I'm done, and that's it. You really try and figure out where you're going wrong, what you're doing right. The point is, not everybody has the same weaknesses. So you want to figure out what your weaknesses are. And then you take notes. That is part of the way you build up your technical. That's the beauty of writing cases. You're actually killing two birds with one stone. That's the beauty of it. You're doing two things. You're learning how to write the cases and you're picking up technical. All of a sudden, an accounting issue comes up and you forget, leases comes up and you forget, oh, leases, I forgot about leases. Yeah, you know what? I think I'll go look up leases. So you learn a few technical points from the case because leases came up. Now you're reading a solution. You're reading some key points on leases that are in the solution. And then you go back to the handbook and you refresh yourself on leases. You take a few notes, and all of a sudden, you've just learned the issue of leases, or at least reminded yourself what you missed. That's why case writing is an excellent way to learn your technical as well. Any questions from any of these key points? Do you write the cases in Word and submit? Excellent question. You have a choice. You can either write the cases in Word and Excel and you email them to us, or you can use the Secure Exam, which I forget the name, now is a new name. You can use the software from the CPA that you have and submit that. The only thing is, if you use the CPA software, which is perfectly fine, it's basically Word and Excel. And I hear this year they're coming out with a new version that's even going to have less differences. In the past, there's been a few minor differences between their software and Word and Excel. They're very minor. It's not a big deal. I think now they've even eliminated them. So if you want to use their software, it's no problem. The only thing you have to be careful of when you submit them to us, you have to use practice mode. If you don't use practice mode, I may not be able to get into your answer. So I could care less if you use regular Word and Excel, or if you use their software. If you use their software, just use practice mode. That's the way it's made for that. Okay, it's not a big deal. And then you submit them online. That's how you submit cases. You never submit a case handwriting it. Don't ever handwrite a case. What for? The exam is not handwritten. Do everything on the computer, regular Word and Excel, or use their software. Makes no difference. You email it to us. The markers mark it online. They give you comments on the paper itself, and then we email it back to you. All right. You're welcome. So other questions, if you have other questions, please keep keep forwarding your questions. To register, you can register online. It doesn't matter to us if you're registered with CPA Canada. I don't care. Okay. I always tell people, they're very slow there. They're a little bureaucratic. They take a long time to get back to you. Obviously, if you register with us and you end up paying, we will refund money if something goes wrong and you don't end up writing the exam. Okay, but don't wait till you're registered with CPA Canada. That is a waste of time. Time is a big thing in studying for this exam. You need to make use of the time. Everybody's busy and has a million things to do, and you don't want to waste a month or 2 months while they're fooling around with your application. Okay, that's my last point here. And you just register online. Once you register, we can have a conversation, meet with you. We could do it in person or we do it on the phone, doesn't matter. The study plan is optional. If you want to drop a study plan, we're more than happy to review it. I just showed you a study plan. You could take it, you can manipulate it, doesn't matter. You can email it to me, whatever you want. Then we give you immediately a technical binder and we give you access to the technical videos. And that's it. And then you proceed into the live sessions depending on when you register. And those live sessions will start in January if you take the cases early on. And you can see the schedule all on the website. Just go to our site, go under admin. You'll see all the different schedules and just click into the version, whichever one you're taking, version 1 or version 2, live online or in class. Click in that schedule and then you can see all the dates and all the sessions lined up. So from the time you register, we'll get you a binder very quickly, and you can start already with your technical, the self-study, and then come January, we start into the live sessions, the cases, and the technical sessions. We're very accessible, people. I mean, you can always ask us questions. It's not a big deal. We're constantly answering questions from students, either by phone or by email. It's not a problem along the way to ask questions. Okay, speaking of questions, does anyone have any additional questions? Here's a question. Oh, that is a very good question. Okay, the question is, if you're doing Capstone 2 with CPA Ontario, is there any option to do the alternate course with pass only for Capstone 1? So the answer is yes. If you do that, we have to come up with a price. It will be significantly lower than the $800 because most of what we are charging you for in the additional alternative course is really the case marking, and that is mainly the Capstone 2 marking. If you're going to do that with Capstone 2, I don't know why, to be honest, you want to do that, but anyway, they're going to charge you $1,400 and we're charging you like $800. But if you want to do that and then get our capstone one, we'll charge you something, but you know, it's not going to be, it will not be most of the $800. So the answer is yes. If you want to do that, I'll have to just make up a different price for you, and I'll even, you know, email me, okay, after the session, email me after the session. If for whatever reason you really want to write the capstone 2 with them, then yeah, that's fine, okay, and I'll tell you exactly what we're going to give you, and then we'll just give you a price. It won't be very much, but yeah, if you want to do that. Okay, but like I say, I'm not sure again why you would want to do that. To me, you could just spend $250, okay, buying the material, and we'll do all the marking, and even give you probably, I mean, I don't know, based on what I hear, probably as good, if not better, feedback from our markers. So I don't know, but yeah, if you want to do that, that's fine. Okay, that's not a problem. Just email me offline once the session is finished. Other questions? I'm just giving a second to see if people have anything. No, people don't have anything. Everyone good? Okay, so people, look, that summarizes our whole study plan / information session. Oh, wait, sorry, there's another question. What's the pass percentage for CFE in past years? Oh, okay, that's an easy question. They release the pass percentage. It's probably, I don't know, it's around 80%. It's around 80% for the CFE. They don't obviously release, I'm not even sure they track a separate percentage for international students. Quite honestly, it's probably lower. I don't know the statistic. Nobody knows. Okay, like I say, I'm not even sure they track it. They sure don't release it. So I don't know. Anecdotally, it's probably a little lower. How much lower? I don't know. But the pass rate overall is good. The pass rate overall is somewhere around the 80% mark. Okay, over the last few years since the new system. They did stop releasing it a few years ago, but then they started releasing it again. Okay, so it is good. But, you know, look, we have thrown, I can tell you, in this program, we have put as much as we possibly can in this program. It's a huge program from our perspective. It is more comprehensive than any other program we have on our entire website, and for a much lower price. The same program to a Canadian student would probably be close to $4,000. We do this because we know international students just need more, and we're trying to do everything we possibly can. To be honest, we haven't even touched our price from previous years, and we just keep adding stuff to the program, okay, because we think international students really need it. So there's a lot here, but if you play it smart and you start early, it should not be a problem. It's very, very doable. As long as you just do it, you'll be in a very good position to get through this exam. The good news is the exam has gotten easier, even though CPA Canada will deny that. It's not true. Trust me when I tell you, it has gotten easier. The level has decreased. There's no question. And that works to your advantage. But you still have to learn how to write the cases and the technical. That's the challenge. But it is very doable. You follow this program, obviously we think your chances are very good at passing. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. It sounds like people enjoyed the session. Very good. Okay, everybody, I'm gonna sign off on the video. So I hope whoever was watching the video found the study plan information session useful. And if you need any more information, obviously contact us.